Welcome to Nonviolence International. Welcome to our series of webinars on nonviolence from around the world, cases, examples, practices, and it is exciting to be the host for this group. My name is Mohammed Abu-Nimer. I'm a professor of peace and conflict resolution at the American University in Washington, D.C., and have done some work around the world on conflict area and training, and also work in nonviolence, both research as well as strategy development, and even some activism in a number of places. I'm honored and happy to be part of this webinar. We have an exciting program, and I think we should go first for our introduction. Let me say a few words before and why we're doing this. As I said, it's really the nonviolence intervention especially in the context of Israel-Palestine is crucial and has been in a place for many, many years, especially in the context of Israel-Palestine and the Middle East more recently in the Arab region, with the various uprising and attempts for bringing systematic change into the different places. The second point I wanted to make is that we have a emphasis on the joint solidarity between Israeli and Palestinians, and that joint solidarity is really what many nonviolence movement will be looking for, to have people from the different sides collaborating on ways in order to enhance their capacity to influence their own constituency from the different parts. There are many obstacles, my third point, and those obstacles need to be acknowledged and recognized. And I think in today's conversation, I hope we're going to get into some of the ways and methods, especially the creative one. If you notice, the title of this conversation is the creative nonviolent actions, and we'll see how creativity can take us beyond some of these obstacles and be helpful in overcoming them. So the creativity is maybe the key term that we're going to look for throughout the conversation as well. I encourage you to relax, listen, and participate and have some discussion with us once our guests speakers came in. I am introducing David Hart, who will take us from Nonviolence, co-executive director of Nonviolence International, who will take us into a wider, more deeper framing of this. But I'm delighted to be with you. Thank you. David, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mohammed. I know for me, we're gathering at a difficult time, and I want to acknowledge the pain many of us are feeling. Honestly, I've been struggling to find realistic reasons for hope, and we are blessed to have a truly international group of committed leaders joining this conversation today. Often big news stories in other nations do not make their way into the US press, but we understand the brutal killing of George Floyd by the police has made it all around the world. And I can't welcome you into this conversation without reflecting on the meaning of solidarity and on the value of the co-resistance model you're going to be learning about today. I am honestly inspired by both of our partners we get to raise up this morning. Our friends from Holy Land Trust are going to lead the way, and then you're going to hear from the Center for Jewish Nonviolence. Both groups know that we need to come together and pave a way for a better path forward. Finding the path seems hard to imagine in this moment of global crisis, but they show us the way. They light the path before us, and all we must do is learn to follow their lead. Friends, our world is beautiful and broken, powerfully beautiful and profoundly broken. At Nonviolence International, we believe that no force in the world other than the great power of nonviolent collective action has the capacity to bring about the changes we desire. We are coming up on an important date in world history. A major change began in 1893 in South Africa. On June 7th, Mohammed Gandhi refused to give up his seat on a train. A young Gandhi learned that day about the importance of saying no to injustice. This pivotal moment began a lifelong journey of discovery that may still, at this late hour, have the power to save us. But if you go and read Wikipedia's article about what happened on June 7th, you'll learn of many violent battles, but not of this pivotal moment. In recent days and weeks, people all over seem to be waking up to the harsh reality that we are addicted to violence. All over, people are seeing that violence is built right into the very system. We face epidemic levels of violence. Even as we hear we are all in this together, we know that to make that commitment real, We have to change our policies in deep and lasting ways. Recently in the US, people who don't understand the heart of nonviolence are calling loudly for nonviolence. Why? Because they want to maintain the brutally violent status quo. Active nonviolence must always be on the side of justice and can never support an unjust order. These days, people are repeating Dr. King's line, riots are the language of the unheard. True and important, but let's also remember that he repeatedly told us that we have a clear and ongoing moral obligation to not only hear those voices, but also to make big structural system changes that reflect the reality that all people everywhere must be valued. When Gandhi sat down on that train, he awakened the potential to change the world without resorting to violence. Of course, he wasn't the first to use nonviolence. He had read Henry David Thoreau, who in turn had read the Bhagavad Gita. These techniques have been used in small and meaningful ways for thousands of years. What Gandhi did was to bring nonviolence into the modern world. He was a deep and a strategic thinker who used creative, constructive nonviolence to overcome a powerful and brutal occupying force. Gandhi paved the way. Years later, King took those methods and applied them to the flawed experiment in democracy that is the United States. As he fought peacefully for justice, he showed us that nonviolence can be applied to a wide variety of situations. Dr. King told us the choice before us is clear: nonviolence or non-existence. His prophetic words ring true today more than ever. Our brave and visionary speakers carry our experiment with nonviolence into the future. I hope together we can find a path out of this darkness to a new and better day. I want to believe that this pandemic can be a portal, a gateway between one world and the next, that Arundhati Roy had called on us to build together. I hope today's webinar is one small and meaningful step in a movement, a global movement, to quickly embrace, explore, and expand the power of active nonviolence. Let's decide together here today to address the epidemic levels of violence and injustice in our societies with love, a commitment to justice, and the transformative potential of active nonviolence. I'm so grateful to be hearing from our wonderful partners today. Thank you. Back to you, Mohammed.
Thank you. Thank you, David, for taking us and framing again the webinar and the context where it happened. I really feel the emotions in your voice, as well as the excitement and the compassion for nonviolence intervention, nonviolence resistance. I want to reiterate that in the streets of Washington last night, in the Manhattan Bridge last night, in St. Louis last night as well. We have seen over 40 different cities around the US yesterday only practicing nonviolence resistance, nonviolence action, and beautiful and inspiring examples of peaceful yet assertive and nonviolent action has been taken. So our webinar is only in many ways a way to contribute, a way to inspire and take these lessons from what's happening around the world, in this case in the Israeli-Palestinian context, but we have plenty of other lessons to be observed and learned. Without further ado, I want to move into our speaker, who we're going to give each one of them about 10 minutes to share their experience about the creative nonviolence action, starting with Elias D'eis, who was born Beit Sahur, with life journey as a Christian Palestinian, life journey in the Beit Sahur and Beit Lahem and that area as well, close to Jerusalem, working with the Holy Land Trust in 2007, and doing really the travel and encounter program that has accompanied about 1,500 peacemakers coming for trips and exchanges and learning more about what's happening on the ground, meeting Palestinians as well as Israeli peace activists and nonviolent resistance who are in full solidarity with the Palestinian movement. You have Elias's full biography on the chat. Feel free to look at it. Elias, the floor is yours. Please feel free to share with us your experience.
Thank you. Thank you very much for giving me the space to be with you today. And I would like to thank our host, Nonviolence International, our partner organization in the US. And I'm happy to be with the Center for Jewish Nonviolence as well. They are one of our key partners for the work we're doing here. Elias and I have been working with Holy Land Trust in the last 13 years of my life as a committed person for this vision that we're carrying at the organization. This is where I believe we can make a change not only in the Israeli-Palestinian context, but I believe that Holy Land Trust can become, or our philosophy and vision can become a model, as an international model for resistance, the injustice, and the inequality and the occupation that we are facing. So Holy Land Trust is one of the Palestinian organizations that was founded more than 20 years ago in 1998 with our vision. How can we create a shared vision among the local communities in the Holy Land, the Israeli and the Palestinian, and all the communities who are connected with this land, and they feel holy, like they make this land holy. So our vision is how can we strengthen these local communities to create one shared vision for peace, especially right after the first peace agreement that was signed by Israel and Palestine, the Oslo Agreement. This agreement that actually was more frustration and depression for the Palestinian than before. And for me personally, as a Palestinian, I was seeing hope from this peace agreement in 1993, 1994, but unfortunately, a few years later, I found out it's more depression and it's a frustration, and it's give me. I almost lost the hope of the result of that peace agreement. And I found that Holy Land Trust is the place where I can see my vision for the future, where I can see real peace is happening between Israeli and Palestinian by focusing on healing our fear and healing our trauma and creating and destroying the bridges, the physical and emotional bridges and historical bridges that we built between Israeli and Palestinian. So Holy Land Trust is the space where it was a life-changing experience for me, where I got to know more about what does the Holy Land means for me, and how can I value the lives of all the indigenous groups and all the communities who are actually living here. How can we honor the land, and how can we live together in equality and in justice? For us, or for me, and for the organization, the political solution is not what we are looking for. We are not here to promote one state or two state solution. We want to create one shared vision, and is how can we live together as a humans? How can we get our rights, our civil rights, our basic rights as a human? Doesn't matter what is your background, what is your identity. We are actually beyond these term of identities. We don't focus on the identity of the Palestinian and the Israeli as a political identity, but how can we create this language where we can understand and respect the needs of each other? And this is where we're trying to put our energy on, is how can we focus on building trust through nonviolence. And our philosophy and all our programs are based on nonviolence teaching, because we believe nonviolence is the answer. And nonviolence is the way to build trust and to build respect between the Israeli and the Palestinian. And nonviolence is about how can we empower the local community, and how can we create a creative nonviolence way. So what we are doing is just focusing on creating leadership on the ground. This is what we are missing, is how can we create leaders who believe in nonviolence and who believe in right for all to live in equality and in peace. How can, and also like we're trying to create a powerful leader in the communities, like to deal with the oppression, and how can we fight the injustice, and how can we fight the oppression and the occupation, because we believe occupation is the main obstacle for peace. And we built all our programs and activities based on this vision, is how can we empower the local community through nonviolence, through giving them trainings. And we have been doing a lot of trainings in the local community on promoting nonviolence. And Holy Land Trust was one of the leading Palestinian organizations that promote nonviolent during the Second Intifada. And like the Second Intifada was more violent action between Israeli and Palestinian. There was a lot of military action, there was a lot of clashes between Palestinian and Israelis, suicide bombs. And Holy Land Trust were promoting the nonviolence in the midst of violence in that time, in 2000, 2001. And we were the leading organization in promoting nonviolence through organizing a creative nonviolent resistance activities in the villages around Bethlehem, in Bil'in, in Al-Ain. Used to recruit Palestinians to join these activities. In the beginning, we were very small, and we've been rejected by the local communities. And because most of many Palestinians, they see nonviolence is the weak part of the resistance. And we've been labeled as the weak part, and nonviolence will not bring any result on the ground. But later on, few years later, we found that Palestinians are adopting the nonviolence and the popular resistance. We were going to demonstrations near the settlements in Area C with the creative activities, like during Christmas, we used to dress like Santa Claus and give candies to the soldiers, play a soccer game, soccer near checkpoints. These kind of like to show the oppressor that we are human, we are same level as you, but the only difference is that you are well armed, you are in your uniform, but we are civilians. We want to spread love. We are calling for our rights. Unfortunately, one of our main challenge was international community and Israel succeeded to label all these kind of action as violence. Palestinian used to be labeled as a terrorism, and this is actually the main term that is challenging us, that any kind of action or any kind of resistance for our right automatically be labeled as a terrorism by the international community. And there's what we are trying to raise here as an organization is to distinguish between terrorism and resistance. And there's a way different between resistance and terrorism. And what we are trying to resist as a Palestinian, to resist for our rights and for our equality and justice. We are not here to resist to destroy the state of Israel, and we are not here we are not against the Jewish. And this is also one of the main experience that I'm passing through, that I used to fear the Jewish people, because for me the Jewish are the enemy. And for me, what is actually my responsibility as a Palestinian to understand Judaism, and what Israel is doing actually is misusing the Judaism teaching, and they are actually misrepresenting Judaism. And we need to distinguish between the state of Israel as colonization and apartheid state and Judaism as a religion. And this is what we've been focusing as an organization, is to distinguish and to raise awareness among the local communities and the international community, to build trust and to heal our fear and to heal our trauma that we inherited from the past. This is what we believe as nonviolence resistance. Nonviolence is not only to go to the street and resist, but nonviolence is a life change experience and transformation journey that we have been going through. How can I see my enemy and how can I love my enemy? And loving your enemy is not just about saying I love you. It's a long journey, and it's a long process that you need to go through by fighting the injustice and fighting the inequality, like the occupation and the situation that we are passing through. So this is basically what we are trying to do as an organization. Like, this is our vision. How can we create a one shared vision among the local communities? And we're trying to implement this vision through different programs, working with international, working with locals, international partners like Nonviolence International and Center for Jewish Nonviolence. This is the way that we can continue our work. In the same time, we are working with the local community.
Thank you, Elias, for your input. And I wanted to highlight, one statement you said, nonviolence resistance is about life-changing experience, journey that you have experienced. And you gave a very compassionate argument for even using the terms love, how to love your enemy. And it's not only about marches and protests in the street. You emphasize building relationship across the divides, the national or the religious divides as well. How do you build those trust relationship is probably one of the main challenge you have. We will listen to Saeed now. Saeed Zarar is also from the Holy Land Trust, titled Creative Manager and organized event for Bethlehem. You could see his biography. His bio is on the chat as well. Work the same with the Travel Encounter Department, or a program that they have since 2012. So with about 8-year experience in the Bethlehem and Beth Sahur experience. Saeed, maybe you can give us a little bit more input or more views about what do you do with the creative manager part, because this is really the title of our conversation today. How is the creativity utilized? What things out of the ordinary or the tradition that you deploy in your nonviolent work with the Holy Trust? The floor is yours. You have about 10 minutes.
Sure. So hello, everyone. The Yeah, thank you for hosting us, actually. So my name again is Saeed, and Saeed is Arabic for happy. When I identify myself, I say I am authentically Judean, a Christian Palestinian, meaning that I am originally, authentically, and historically coming from a family that has always lived in Bethlehem, that has never come from anywhere else in the world. I live a few minutes far from the Church of the Nativity, where the Christ was born, and my family has been living there for the last 800 years. So I'm authentically Judean. I'm a native that has always lived in this land. Just maybe just to tell you more about myself, I'm an artist. I do theater, playwright, directing, acting, as well as I call myself a community activist since the beginnings of my life. So, during my life, I grew up in Bethlehem city to a Christian Palestinian family that has never been affiliated to any, political party. Yet during the first Intifada, we know that, everybody was standing with everybody, and there was grassroots committees that was working together during the first Intifada. I was born during the first Intifada, so what I know about it is very little. When I was a kid, for sure, I was born 1988. But growing up in such a city like Bethlehem, where there's more of interaction, we've always seen people coming in and out. So I've grew up during the years of the 90s, where I do remember very well having Israelis touring around in the city, Israelis coming, on shopping, or those who don't keep their Shabbat and happen to live in Jerusalem. I remember very well that they used to come to Bethlehem, to shop, to party, and to really interact with the people. And that was really organic. And I call those days of the 90s the very brightful years, where we could see those two peoples, after all those years of oppression, could at least live together. My father used to be an artist as well, who does sculptures of olive wood. And I remember my father making the menorah and the other Jewish symbols that used to be sold for the souvenir shops. So I was even very familiar with those symbols coming out from the workshop of my father, and having, many people coming in and out, Israelis ordering, different things. In the millennium, when the second Intifada started, I was a teenager by then. My mother is a Jerusalemite, so I have a small family that lives in Jerusalem. And during 1998 until the millennium, my uncle was suffering from cancer, and he lived in Jerusalem. And I remember very well the first encounter when I encountered a soldier. It was in September 2000, right after the beginning of the second Intifada. It was the first time that we were going there for a visit, and we found out that we needed to hold something called a permit. And that was the beginning of the division between both people who live on each side. During the second Intifada, it was really bloody, brutal, overwhelming for a teenager to live, and really seeing and hearing things that would seem very unhealthy for kids, people my age at that time. And I grew up holding this fear, yet also holding kind of revenge and hatred. What I knew about Israel was not a nation. What I knew about Israel was only a soldier, a flag, and a language. I've never had any kind of interaction with any Israeli. It's never been on the agenda for somebody my age. And yet, I've never chose, violence in my life at any point. I've never participated even in a fight in school until now. I mean, I've never chose violence as a way, and I've also had faith in that comes from my authentic Christian faith as a Christ follower. We're familiar with the Christian teachings of love, of compassion, of standing with the marginalized, of really not being in silence and mute when injustices are happening, and taking Jesus as an example for myself. He was a peace activist at his time, when the land was also occupied by the Romans. So I was, after the university time, I started doing more of theater, more of traveling, and meeting more and more people. Living in Ramallah at that time for me was challenging, because Ramallah is Ramallah. It's, the temporal capital somehow, and where you don't really feel the oppression really well. And I needed to come back to Bethlehem. Receiving a phone call from my best friend who's sitting right on my left, Elias, who worked for Holy Land Trust for years. He said, "Hey, come here. We have an idea of a summer gathering. Maybe be a festival. Would you like to come and brainstorm? So I made it, and I came to Holy Land Trust in 2012, only working on Bethlehem Life Festival, which is a big festivity that we hold that I will speak about in a minute. And it was the life-changing experience for me to understand what nonviolence really is and to really find myself as a peace activist, taking myself on a journey of 10 days to Auschwitz and Birkenau and learning more about, the national Jewish fear, of the Holocaust, and really reflecting it of what's happening here on the ground and taking every single act as an example of fear. Taking the journey alongside with Elias and Sami Awad, who some of you are really familiar with, I started, taking more and more space in Holy Land Trust to come up with more of creative ideas that we can do to show the other side that we are as humans as you guys are. One of the things that I do organize is something called the Home Rebuilding Project. And if you're not familiar, 68 of the West Bank of the occupied territories of Palestine is basically recognized as Area C. And in Area C, Palestinians do not have right of construction, to power, to water, to even agriculture. Yet people will still, expand their houses. The brother will still build next to the brother. And yet the Jerusalem municipality will send the army to demolish as much houses as they can every single day as we're speaking now. And for us, actually, like as giving also people here, the Palestinians, when Elias mentioned, it's sometimes taken as a weak part, you try to give them an alternative to violence and you say, hey, we will not stay silent, we will not be mute, but let's do something alternative to violence. So what we do is that we bring as much, international solidarity groups, and we do rebuild homes over their ruins. So showing the Palestinians who's got their houses demolished that still our voices are heard from some of the people from the international community who we're trying to build, more of advocacy for. And as well, we are resisting our occupier in a very beautiful way. We're rebuilding your house, right? One other thing that I also organize is the olive harvest. Palestine and the land of the Levant over here is very familiar for the greatest virgin olive oil that you can taste, I promise. And so many of those farmers also in Area C will not be able to reach out their lands to cultivate their olives, to pick their olives. So what we do is also we bring solidarity groups, and we also go right there to pick olives with those peoples. And the international presence will decrease the violence that the settlers can create to the Palestinians who are living in that area. A very important part for me as an artist is celebration. I mean, we're here to celebrate life. We're on this planet to spread love and also to celebrate the life behind those borders. And like for us, we're surrounded by apartheid walls all over the West Bank. Yet we are people who have culture, authenticity, music, customs, creative people who do beautiful artistic and alternative things. So what we do is that we hold a summer festivity that is called Bethlehem Life Festival, where we put it as a platform for international and local artists to come together in the same spot and celebrate life. Last year, I was dreaming, maybe I will end with that so I don't expand my time. Last year, I've taken this festival from the old city of Bethlehem, right next to the Rachel Tomb area of Bethlehem, the northern entrance of Bethlehem, where the great, like the big apartheid wall is there, surrounded with watching towers. And I said, I'm gonna do a big demonstration with great music. And so we've had tens of thousands of people right next to the watching towers, celebrating life, singing, dancing, chilling, as well as the military vehicles would still come for visits, trying to provoke people just to do any kind of violent act so they can justify any kind of violent act that they can do. Fortunately, those tens of thousands of people who were there got the message. 4 days of celebration, not us engaging ourselves behind the walls, yet the soldiers enclosed within their watching towers. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Saeed. Thank you, Saeed, for the dance, for the live festival art annual, for the farmers solidarity trips, and the actual help with them to produce and cultivate the extraordinary olive oil that you described, as well as for the home rebuilding houses that were demolished. Thank you, or actually allowing them to be built. But I think more equally important to this, if not more, is your personal journey and how you were exposed to the system of occupation and how you went through your life to frame it in a way that is constructive, positive, maybe fitting your name as Saeed, as happy. But thank you again for both the personal journey story as well as the valuable example you've shared. Our next speaker is Scout Bratt, who served as operational manager of the Center for Jewish Nonviolence as well. You see, we have a center in Bethlehem and a center here operating in the US, I do believe, and have lots of activities. You can see the full bio in the chat, working with youth, working with delegations, also making the linkage to nonviolence activities from a Jewish perspective as well. Looking forward to hear you from you, Scout. The floor is yours. Thank you for your patience with us. You have about 10 minutes.
Thank you. Hi, all. Thank you to everyone who's joining from across the globe, especially in this moment. It feels really meaningful and important to be together talking about creative nonviolence when across the world we are seeing people respond in this moment to long, deeply rooted generational and interpersonal and institutional violence in this moment. I'm in Chicago right now, where there's a lot of Black-led, people of color-led organizing in response to police brutality that I believe are deeply aligned with much of what the nonviolence resistance has looked like in both Palestine and in relationships that CJNV, the Center for Jewish Nonviolence, has been building and working towards. So thank you. I am from the United States, and I grew up in a deeply Zionist household and attended a Jewish day school from kindergarten through 12th grade, was active in Hillel in my college, went to Jewish summer camp that was Zionist. Wasn't until I had taken trips and been staying in Israel, in West Jerusalem, in between high school and college, and had no context or understanding and or engagement with the concept of nonviolent resistance nor Palestinian society and resistance until I reached college, where I studied conflict resolution and transformation and studied it through a feminist lens that introduced me immediately to Palestinian struggle and nonviolence resistance and the deep history that to me became so clearly about putting into practice values that I had been raised with, but was not being put into practice in solidarity with Palestinians. As a Jewish person, I was seeing lots of people articulate these values with words, but not put them into practice in my own life. And it wasn't until I became a part of the Center for Jewish Nonviolence that I was able to see that the long history and legacy of nonviolent resistance and nonviolent community building was actually being engaged with proactively in Jewish community. Specifically, I joined the Center for Jewish Nonviolence on a delegation in 2016, which was not the first delegation of the Center for Jewish Nonviolence. The Center for Jewish Nonviolence, to give a little bit of history, was started just 5 years ago when the founder, Alana Sumka, started a call with Daoud Nasser, who in 2014, his family farm was destroyed by the Israeli military and had tons of olive trees uprooted, and destroyed. And Daoud put a call out to have Jewish people coming in solidarity to rebuild the farm. And that in of itself was an act of nonviolence resistance that was not only going to yield a material gain of rebuilding a farm and rebuilding the resources for Daoud's family and income and food, but was also going to symbolically show that Jewish people can stand in solidarity and resisting the violence that is often done in our name. By necessity, that created relationships that were called upon by Palestinians and actively resisted the narrative that I grew up with, which is that Jews and Palestinians do not build community together, do not have points of connection, cannot co-resist together. So from the outset of the Center for Jewish Nonviolence back in 2014, the first delegation was in winter of 2015. Every time that the Center for Jewish Nonviolence has brought diaspora Jews, international Jews, together to work with Palestinians on the ground, it has been by creating relationships that are by definition resistive and resisting those definitions that we're oftentimes told we have to stick to, those definitions of who can build trust and community with who and who can't. What I would say is that there is a relationship-based approach to our work, and that is very transgressive in and of itself. And really, there was no other organization from the Jewish context that Alana saw at that time in 2015. And I believe we've continued to sustain that space that other organizations have not filled, that Jews with immense privilege, specifically in the context of Israel and Palestine, must put our bodies on the line to stand in solidarity with those who are targeted and dehumanized by the Israeli state. Walking the line of solidarity through direct action was something that we felt we could do, and that we as Jews from the diaspora, Jews often from countries that are giving money to the Israeli government to continue the violence of the occupation, sustain it, we could provide that solidarity in that direct action method in a really unique way, in a way that no one else could because of our place of privilege. This idea of direct action and putting our bodies on the line in solidarity with Palestinians is also really built upon trust. And that trust requires relationship building. In our work, we center relationships, the relationships I've described before, the relationships we've been in with HLT, and the relationships that we continue to sustain even at this time when international travel is not possible. Over the course of CJNV's 5-year history, what we've learned is that the relationships we're building, that's something that we're consistently able to offer. Those critical connections across the globe, so that when Jewish diaspora activists have been on delegations, when they go back to their home communities and doing solidarity work and planning and organizing in their home communities, the critical connections they built in a CJNV context is what ensures that all actions in the diaspora and or internationally are still centering Palestinian voices and experiences on the ground, because those are the relationships that we continue to sustain with our Palestinian partners. That, I think, is a really important piece that for us feels like a core component of creative nonviolent resistance and action, is that through deep, committed relationships with each other, those relationships that are transgressive in and of themselves, we're continuing to conjure up new opportunities to create the world that we want to see, and that we're not able to do if we're not in relationship with each other. And I think Claire will speak a little bit more to some of the ways in which we've seen that in practice in our delegation. It's just for us, by virtue of living each day rooted in relationship, those relationships are what enable us to then mobilize in times of increased need, and when Palestinian partners identify needs that we as a mobilization group can act upon through this building of relationships that we're able to move.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you. And you did a great job in linking it to Claire as well. I wanted really to commend you on the courage and on you and our previous speakers share so much in your life journey in terms of being able to really go through transformative journey, and the process takes you to a place of solidarity with the other, understanding solidarity with the other, and most important, you highlighted the relationship building, because it seemed to me trust and relationship are really the two key ingredients you have been trying to emphasize in the work. Maybe we can delve more into the dynamic and the challenges of building such a relationship and trust in the context of Israel, Palestine, in the context of Muslim, Jewish, Christian communities as well, and how does that translate in Chicago? Once the delegation come back, I know that's a challenge that most of the delegations who go to Israel, Palestine for solidarity face. But thank you again for both your recognition, the place of privilege, and then translating that into action, to put it in action, as you said. Clare Jordan, a participant, actually, not an organizer of the delegation 2016 to 17 by the Center of Jewish Nonviolence, was in Hebron as part of that. At the following delegation in spring 2019, Claire was part of the Bir al-Eid, planning from all that's left side of things, most recently in the lead up to the 2020 delegation. So what we have really is a perspective of a delegate for 3 years back and forth to Israel, Palestine. Delighted to hear you, Claire. The floor is yours. You have about 10 minutes. Please try to be specific in the creative aspect that you've seen.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's so great to be with all of you today. I'm really excited to be invited. And I'm in Kansas City right now, speaking to all of you, but I normally, or for the last year and a half, have been in Jerusalem, carrying out a lot of these on-the-ground relationships for Center for Jewish Nonviolence and a lot of the organizing. And to clarify, yes, so I was a participant on CJNV in 2016 for an action called Cinema Hebron, which was an action to rebuild a home that had been taken over by settlers in Tel Rameda into a cinema for the indigenous community there. It's a place for entertainment and for the community to come together and to creatively resist occupation. This was an incredibly transformative experience for me, has since been, how I have become more involved with CJNV, and now I'm on the steering committee. So anyway, I just wanted to talk a little bit more about the creative, nonviolent direct actions that CJNV has been carrying out this last year. And it feels really important to talk about right now in the backdrop of what's happening. As Scout said, and other people have mentioned, in America, we're seeing incredible Black-led protests, and we see that solidarity and co-resistance gets the goods. That's what Center for Jewish Nonviolence has been able to cultivate, is these on-the-ground relationships and these critical connections. So for example, last spring in Bir el-Eid, it was a call from the community from the South Hebron Hills to rehabilitate this road that was disconnecting resources in the South Hebron Hills. And we were able to show up and bring Jewish diaspora activists to participate on the ground. When the police escalated the violence, did mass arrests, we were able to support each other. Everyone was released at the same time: Palestinians, Israelis, Jewish diaspora activists. And I think this is a tangible way we can put our bodies on the line and our privilege and show that solidarity gets the goods, not just symbolically and materially, but actually materially. We're able to achieve things on the ground. Bir el-Eid is still being worked on. It's still being rehabilitated by Tayush and on the ground people. And CJNV has been able to amplify that from afar, from the Jewish diaspora activists that return to the United States and carry this work out by doing speaking tours and telling about their stories and their personal transformation, but also being accountable to the people on the ground and trying to amplify that voice. And then this last fall was an action called nvi-ny, which is a spring in the South Hebron Hills right by Abigail settlement that the settlement has taken over and calls Abigail Spring. But our Palestinian partners had shared with us that decades prior, they had taken their children there to swim and to play, take care of their livestock, and it had been like a crucial water resource for them that they could no longer use because the settlement was now taking it over and harassing any Palestinians that showed up. And so we had meetings about this. We talked about what it would look like to stand in solidarity to try to reclaim this spring. Yeah, we did an action that was like symbolically based on how water access in the South Hebron Hills and how water access is a huge human rights violation and how it's being cut off to Palestinian communities. But also materially, we were able to, with our privilege and our solidarity on the ground and these relationships that we've built over years of trust, to show up in that moment and to reclaim the spring and its rightful name, Ain el-Bedda. Yeah, till this moment, there is being work done to rehabilitate the spring, to make sure that Al-Twani and Susi and Umacher and all the South Hebron Hills communities can go to this spring. So that's just a few things to share what we have been working on in the past year. And moving forward, we're just really looking how to continue to support our relationships and to build trust in this moment of global upheaval, because we know that the occupation is continuing under Corona, and we know that actually it's a free pass while there's sometimes an absence of international presence for the settlers to really incite violence and harassment on the indigenous communities there. We are now in a process of strategic prioritizing about how we can integrate this feedback about how we can show up as a solidarity organization on the ground and amplify those voices abroad. Yeah, I think I'll leave it there about how CJNV is moving forward, and it's just great to be in conversation with all of you.
Thank you. Thank you, Claire. I appreciate your example and your commitment, and also I think sharing with us really concrete and tangible examples on the ground in terms of confrontation of, in many ways, injustice, access to water as you describe it, as well as finding an act of solidarity that is in many ways empowering and supporting the local communities in the southern hills of Hebron or El Khalil as well. And your last point probably is something something we need to pick up on it on the next phase of this webinar in the discussion. I'm encouraging everyone, especially dear listeners here with experience in this area, to think about how to support the sustaining of relationship in a global pandemic reality. But even beyond the global pandemic reality, just how do we maintain the relationship with each other in supporting creative nonviolence action in the context of Israel-Palestine, in the context of Jewish, Muslim, Christian relations in that region? How to do that beyond the one trip or the delegation model seem to be our two partners are working on, whether it is Holy Land Trust or Nonviolence Jewish International Center of Jewish Nonviolence as well, dealing with that. So please keep that in mind. I want to open, thank you, the four of you. I want to open for the next 35 minutes the conversation and discussion. I know we have a couple of interns who are supporting and working with Nonviolence International as well, and they are ready to ask some questions. So let me take their two questions. Feel free to unmute yourself and pose your question, and then we'll open it for the general discussion and comment. Yes, ready to take the comment from the interns.
Hi, I had a question. My name's Fonzie Mendoza. I'm from Brownsville, Texas. Nice to meet everyone. So I actually had a question, kind of a comment question for Scout about, I really liked, Claire also brought this up as well, how Jewish activists use their bodies as protection and stood in solidarity and put it on the line for Palestinian peoples. Could you dive into that a little bit further? Because I know we're also seeing that here in the US with the Black Lives Matter movement. White people are standing in the front lines, protecting people of color, Black people, with their bodies because they're less likely to be hurt by the police. So could you please talk about a little more of the tactics you all use in that way to use your bodies, that Jewish people use their bodies to protect Palestinians? I'd really like to know more.
Hi, my name is Claire. I'm an intern with Nonviolence International. Right now I'm in the Chicago area. So I just had a question for Claire and Scout with CJNV as well. I know you guys talked, it's kind of the opposite question from what Fonzie just asked actually, but I'm curious kind of the sort of backroom stuff that you guys have done in, like, obviously people within your community would not necessarily agree with you, and the people that you know that might still be Zionists or have that, and like how do you kind of engage in those conversations, and what sort of role does that play in you sort of using your privilege to have access to people who, you know, disagree with maybe the work that you're doing? I know that's another thing that's kind of been going on in the United States right now, and I'm really curious about like how you kind of engage in those conversations and make progress in that way, in addition to sort of publicly standing in solidarity with the Palestinian people.
Yeah, thank you. I'll start, and then Claire, jump in, please. I mean, my initial thought is like, I would actually want to center the voices of HLT in this moment and feel like this time and like your audience and time should be about centering experiences of Palestinians on the ground in this moment. So that's like a small example of being like, this is a privileged place to be in this moment. We have a bunch of people here who have time and space and resources to be on this call. How do we use space that we've been given and like redirect it? That would be my first comment. And I want to pause and say, like, Saeed and Elias, if you have thoughts about what you've seen or experiences that you've had about backlash within your community also, because we've worked together, that's my instinct. So I'll pause there.
No, I was just going to say, I agree with Scott. I'd love to hear from Elias and Saeed about what they have to say about what that can actually look like, Jewish people with privilege putting their body on the line. I think that's actually a better question suited for them. What I would like to say, I guess I will just address a bit about the backlash from our own community. And so I think, well, right now in my talk, I focused about on the ground relationships and how we can show solidarity. But another crucial part of CJNV is the transformative work of the delegate and them returning to the United States and carrying out the work in their communities, in the organizing work they already do, like in If Not Now, Jewish Voice for Peace, J Street, Jewish Independent Voices, other organizations. So through that organizing and through the analysis and the framework that we do on CJNV, they're given tools to how to talk to the community, maybe polarize around on the issue to bring people on, or to learn how to talk to different communities and different audiences to work towards Jewish transformation, Jewish diaspora transformation, and how we can follow the lead of communities on the ground.
I guess we have another question from Deborah from Canada. What would be the best advice for her as a Canadian in order to join the solidarity with the Palestinian nonviolent movement action? But before we move to that question, I wanted to go back to Elias and Saeed. Do you have any comment on the previous two questions regarding using the body to protect and in solidarity, or dealing with the backlash in the community?
Yeah, I think we as an organization, we see the importance of the Jewish and the Israeli presence in our struggle. We as a Palestinian, we see we cannot do the freedom resistance by ourselves. We need a partner, and we see the Jewish community as the main partner for resistance, the occupation, and ending the oppression that we're facing. But we as a Palestinian organization as well, we suffer from what is called normalization. And dealing with any Jew or dealing with any Israeli, the Palestinian anti-normalization will label them as we are making a relationship, and we are actually accepting the reality that we're gonna live together and there is no problems, and this is what we are facing through. But what we are trying to do as an organization is challenging the community and telling them showing them the importance of the Jewish and the Israeli joining our struggle, because we've been doing a lot of dialogue between Israeli and Palestinian. There's many, like hundreds of thousands of programs that bringing Israeli and Palestinian to meet and just to talk about future and just to make to be friends. And at the end of the day, everyone will go back home and they will be back to their normal life, and there is no action. And we believe it's time for action, and this is what we are doing now. We're working with an Israeli and Palestinian joint group in the Jordan Valley. It's a new program that we are running just now. We started like a few months ago. It's a joint Israeli and Palestinian group to work on the environmental justice on the Jordan Valley, and how can we help the Palestinian communities in the Jordan Valley to fight for their rights at the cause of the Israeli military occupation in the Jordan Valley. Many Palestinian communities are infected in a direct way by the settlers and by the Israeli military, and now by having a joint Israeli and Palestinian to go there to resist the occupation together, and we are showing the Palestinian that we have a lot of Israeli activists. We are here to support and to resist for your rights, and this is what we are trying to show for the Palestinian as well, that show like having an Israeli does not mean normalization, and we are beyond, like we are not actually agreeing with the term normalization, because we are not doing any kind of normalization. What we are doing is taking action together. We are building, like we're putting our hands together to fight the injustice and to fight the occupation. And this is where we see the importance of working with the Center for Jewish Nonviolence to reach the Jewish community all over the world, and as well to reach the Israeli citizen that they just have the privilege of living in the state of Israel and they have nothing to do toward the occupation. And I think it's time for them to take action on the occupation with the Palestinians.
Andrew had another question direct for the Palestinian side here, Saeed or Elias. If the government goes and annexing plan forward, how would that affect the Holy Land Trust operation?
Yeah, so maybe answering Deborah first. I think there's many things that people can do to stand in solidarity with us. Curiosity, I would say first. So your question is the beginning, right? I mean, people living in their homes, in Canada, in the US, in Europe. I think the first thing that people can start doing is really boycotting all the Israeli goods that come from, settlements that come from the West Bank, right? Just to those, like those big factories that are functioning in the West Bank, and really taking the resources of the Palestinians who are living there. So, basically boycotting is one answer. And then what I would add is coming and being. What we do in the Travel and Encounter department is basically not having a one biased side of the story. We offer dual narrative tours, and for me, I always say it's the we don't ask people to be pro-Palestinians or pro-Israelis, because if you're pro something, if you're pro one group of people, you're against the other. This is not what our vision is about. When people come here, I say just come and really see and witness what's going in here and just be with the people. Our voices are very low, right? We don't control the media, unfortunately, and we know that the American and the Western media is totally in support of the Israeli side, right? So our voices are really small. And what we want from people is to basically helping us, raising up our voices and really telling you daily stories of what's really happening in the West Bank and in the occupied territories. And maybe moving to Andrew's. Hello, Andrew. Andrew has been with us in several, action things that we've done in the West Bank. Really having you is great again. Your question is really important. We're in a crucial moment where we're seeing things started happening on the ground of the annexation of the West Bank. We as Palestinians, we don't have any idea what's really happening. We've heard that, parts of Area C, basically, which makes 68% of the West Bank will be annexed to the Israeli side, but there's no concrete map, only, what we got from Mr. Trump, that even Swiss cheese would look much better than this, right? So we don't really know which parts of the West Bank will be annexed, our custody as people, whom it will be given to. Will the Palestinian Authority still function after that, or another power will take custody of us? So we are sure that our work will be totally affected, and maybe the CGNV as well, because they also, when they come here, they function in Area C. This is where people really need us, those native communities who are living. So losing Area C is to the side of Israel will limit the work we're trying to do, and will limit our movement to reaching out those small communities that do live right next to the settlements in Area C. So we're witnessing, as you guys are, unfortunately, like we don't really know what's going to happen on the ground. Just being mindful about it and really praying that the Israeli side will do something against what Trump and Netanyahu are trying to implement on the ground.
Hi everybody. First of all, I'm Makhluk. My name. I'm in New York, working the Nonviolence International. So I express my really deepest thanks and gratitude for arranging this webinar on one of the most important issue of the world. Since long, the Palestine and Israel, this issue have been existing. It's not only provoking instability in the Middle East, but all around the world. The ground reality is that Israel exists, Palestine exists. Contrary to that, Israel's sides and Palestine sides are not accepting each other's. This problem is deeply rooted to the political solution. I strongly believe on that. There had been a lot of wars involving whole Middle East and all those things, a lot of violent activities spreading all over the world. Now, both this country actually need to realize that we exist. One cannot swallow another. I strongly believe that the message that there is no peace in Palestine, no peace in Israel. If there is no peace in Israel, there is no peace in Palestine. This message has to be projected non-violence methodology very, very seriously and deeply. The day both parties will agree to that, realize to that. I'm not talking about the government, I am not talking about the military, but the common people in Israel and Palestine. I think they behave much more maturely than what the government and military and other military.
Makhluk, thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I hope if you have a question, it would be great to put it now. If not, your comment and the message have been transmitted.
Yes, sir. Actually, I'm going to that. So my specific question is that, as you guys can comment on that, how the non-violent message that if there is no peace in Israel, there is no peace in Palestine can be projected by non-violent activities and different methodology. How better we can project it? That's the opinion of I would like to get from you. Thank you.
How better to position it, right? You're saying?
Yeah, I'm saying that the message, very specific message that I have said, no peace in Israel, no peace in Palestine. If there is, and the other way, no peace in Palestine, no peace in Israel. This message, how we can project correctly and very strongly by following non-violent methodology.
Thank you. So how do we take this message of peace in the two communities is interdependent? How do we make it on a mass level? How do we convince people with that by using non-violence action? That's the challenge.
Hi everyone, my name's Reese. I'm 16 years old and I'm from South Africa. I live in Cape Town, and actually because of our apartheid history, we have a very segregated society today. We have a big Muslim and Jewish community because of the diaspora and different effects of colonization. And I really like the points you were bringing up about the international awareness and solidarity to create awareness to the Israel-Palestine conflict. In my situation, this is directed to all the panelists, but in my situation in South Africa, when the communities aren't necessarily only divided by religion or views, but also physically and geographically, how would you sort of approach beginning to speak about peace between both Israel and Palestine?
One more question was put on the chat, has to do with the position on the BDS from Mary Allen. How do you feel, especially about the academic and cultural boycott? Because there have been some, I think Saeed mentioned boycotting settlement product, and that's, I think, triggered that notion. I'll give a round, Scout, Claire, and then we go to Saeed as well, and Elias. Any comment on these three questions?
Sure. I think the first piece about solidarity, thank you, individual who asked about it, in terms of the various separations, both like physical and like systemic. That's a great question. And I think one piece that I have seen CJNV try to operate through is one like deep investigation of history and learning from movements that have worked in the past, thinking through already like practice border and boundary crossing that has been built throughout history and oftentimes focused like on individual relationships. And our strategy is very much based in building individual relationships with different community members across communities and figuring out how those relationships of like deepening trust can then yield increased opportunities for more escalatory actions. So referring back to a question that someone else provided about how and when Jewish people, specifically Jews of privilege, and by that I mean white Jews, often Ashkenazi Jews, not all of whom are white Jews, but carry with us privilege. It is through the building of trust between us and Palestinian partners that we are able to then say, like, we can put our bodies on the line and you can trust that we will hold that blockade, that we will put ourselves in between you and an IDF soldier, that we will be following up and doing jail support. So I think that one piece of like, it is a long journey of relationship building that can start with individual relationships that build over time. And then I think in terms of the BDS question, I'll say that CJNV does not have a stance on boycott, divestment, and sanctions. So many of the organizations that we partner with, many of the people from our communities, our community members are part of organizations like Jewish Voice for Peace that do have their own stances on boycott that call from Palestinians. So I will pause there and shift to Claire.
Claire.
So I was just wanting to respond to about CJNV's stance on like visions for peace in Israel, Palestine. Again, as we said, as Scouts emphasize, it's all built in relationships and following the lead. And so we don't actually have a vision for what exactly a just peace looks like. Like, we are not an indigenous community there, and we're following the lead. So we are in constant conversation, but I think what the actual idea is, it will be rooted in what the people on the ground need. And CJNV's role is to be responsive to that. So like in July, when potentially annexation could happen, yes, if there is no peace in Palestine, there will be no peace in Israel, right? CJNV's role is to be in conversation with those relationships we have on the ground to fall into the places that we need to fall into place. Yeah, I think tactically that's how CJNV operates, and less about like us having such a clear vision ourselves about what that looks like, but to be in constant conversation with others about that.
Do we have an extra 1 hour?
No, you have 30 seconds.
We believe fear is the motivator for violence. Fear is the main border in building trust. So what we have been trying to do as an organization is we focus on healing the hatred and healing the fear, because these are the main resource of violence that exists between Israel and Palestine. So without healing the fear that exists in both communities, we will never have a peace in both sides. And healing the fear is by building relationship, by understanding the needs and seeing the mutuality and the similarity between the two groups and our connection with this land. We are the trustees of this land, the Holy Land. And how can we create this transformation and healing in both communities to see the peace is possible? Answering the second question is like religious diversity. I think we believe that Israel cannot be a Jewish state and a democratic state. This is a contradiction. Like, being a Jewish state is having the right to annex the land and to undermine the rights of other communities who are living here. We have several communities who are living and connecting with this land historically. Muslim, Christian, Buddhist, the Druze, Samaritan, Bedouins, they're all connected with this land. So if Israel continue being a Jewish state, we will never have a democracy. And this is what we are trying to raise among the Israeli friends, and we are trying to transform the Israeli by raising their awareness, having the rights of others to exist here, and how can you trust and build relationship with the others. For the BDS, I don't know, we believe that BDS is one of the non-violence tools, but BDS is not our target. It's not our goal. It's not our vision. We want to end the Israeli occupation and to end the oppression. And BDS is one of the tools that we can use as a Palestinian, as an international. But it's not the only way. It's one of the ways that can be used.
Yeah, I mean, only like a quick comment just for, no peace in Israel, no peace in Palestine, sure. But as well, peace. For us, peace is not only a piece of paper. Peace is not only when two governments are sitting together to come up with a magical masterpiece, that, would be implemented and then it's over. My only problem with what's happening is only the exclusivity, right? Like when Elias mentioned the Jewish state, then it means that, Al-Haram al-Sharif can be, for Jews only. And then Al-Haram al-Ibrahimi in Hebron would be for Jews. Who can undermine the rights of anybody here? The diversity is something that we can celebrate and give as a model. When Christians, Muslims, and Jews can really share this land equally, meaning as a Christian, I should enjoy my right, to worship in the Galilee. It's where the Christian ministry took place. Jesus was only born here in Bethlehem. Where I would respect the right of the Jewish to go worship in the old city of Shechem or in Hebron, right? And also for the Muslim to have his own right to go and worship in Al-Aqsa Mosque. So bringing people together would bring this understanding of how sacred this land is for everybody, for each one of us, So my answer is to really, bring just people together, and this is hard, but this is our mission.
Thank you, Saeed, for emphasizing that.
First of all, good evening, sir. I have to ask, we are talking so many things about peace. How can we think or talk about solidarity or unity when the concept of the country itself is the major cause of structural violence? And we know very well that structural violence enforces the direct violence.
Yes, that's your question, right?
Yeah.
Thank you. So thank you for pointing out the structural violence aspect and that the difficulty of dealing with this. I want to thank everyone with this. Thank our panelists. Thank you for your comments. I would have loved to give you more time to reflect on this, but I want to be mindful of the time. We only have few minutes, and I am supposed to give this 5 minutes very powerful closing. And I'm not sure how to do a powerful closing, but I can reflect a couple of minutes on this conversation we had and input and the questions to say that for me, it really reasserted that as much as we need the techniques and the creativity of tools in how to overcome the structural violence, the occupation, how to overcome the isolation, the enclaves, the privileges that we are all enjoy regardless our ethnicity or religion, at the end of the day, for me, it's not really the technique. I think the creativity is not in the technique, and this might be surprising for this title of the webinar. For me, it's really from the 4 speakers that we've heard, they gave wonderful, amazing example of really inspiring what gets a 2 women or a young woman from Chicago to pack and go to Palestine and work in Hebron, in the southern part of hills of Hebron, with a small community in Ain al-Bardi. For that, you need really to have an open heart for change. You need to have a certain amount of courage to get away and take risks, to be out of the comfort zone, to be willing to give up some of the comfort zone and some of the safety that you have gained by being within one community. And also for our 2 colleague Palestinians who are here, they give very inspiring story about their life journey, about the belief in the positive contact with the other, with the enemy who is defined as an enemy in a brutal way, enemy on all levels in that sense for the Palestinian, because the occupation penetrates every second of a Palestinian life. So to have the courage to meet with an Israeli Jewish or with a Jewish American, that really an incredible. It requires energy. It requires confrontation. And that's why I don't think it's a matter of technique. It's a matter of me making that decision for my life within my life. And to do that, we need to get out and learn how to come our fear. I think Elias mentioned that. It's really overcoming the fear of the other. The fear of the other make us in a jail, make us imprisoned, block, confine us to very narrow compartment of thinking. And I think once you overcome that fear, it's limitless. It's the creativity aspect is really unlimited in terms of what one can do in order to express solidarity. You've heard 10, 15 different examples, but those examples, people done them after they overcome their fear and they broke the boundaries and the barriers imposed on them by their community. And you saw the fear of Corona, the fear of COVID-19 in the US did not prevent people from going to the streets, lying on the streets of Washington, holding each other. I saw a wonderful photo of white women making a human chain to protect protesters in St. Louis, I believe. I've seen protesters in Washington lying on the streets and on the main road. The creativity is, as I said, limitless. You have so many ways to express the nonviolent action. But what's usually missing is really the courage in the heart, the openness to learn about one's own fear and limitation. And that does not happen in one day. For me, it took me all my life since I was maybe 15 years old when I encountered the first person, Israel, Palestine, who's not from my community. And since then until today, I'm still in this journey of trying to overcome my fears and trying to learn more what can be done to contribute to people in myself and to others in this journey. I'm not sure that I've covered any of the content anymore, but I think this is a closing from my heart. I want to thank everyone, and I want to invite everyone to unmute your microphone before we leave, and just to say one word in your mind that has to do with nonviolence and peace. Say it all together, and we can close this with a happy birthday for Michael Beer, who is celebrating his 21 years old birthday. Happy birthday, Mike.
Relationship.
Vitality.
Shalom.
Justice.
Need justice.
Justice. Love.
Compassion.
Salam, shalom.
Harmony.
Hope.
Justice.
Patience. Solidarity.
Hope.
Solidarity.
Nonviolence and peace.
Together.
Solidarity.
Thank you all. I hope you got your word in. And if you're in DC, in the US, in North America, or in the US, send your compassion, do your solidarity in any way you can. Creative and uncreative is all accepted at these difficult times. If you're also outside, be careful and take care of your health and find ways to be in solidarity with everybody around the world who have a cause of injustice. Thank you, and I leave you in peace.